Yesterday, we learned the Sravaka meditation on non-self. Today, we will study the Vipassana of the Mahayana. The Vipassana of Mahayana bodhisattvas is the meditation on the selflessness of phenomena. A bodhisattva meditates based on the 6 paramitas. There is the selflessness of persons discussed earlier and the selflessness of phenomena. Phenomena refer to everything that appears throughout the entire dharma realm. Anything that our 6 senses can perceive is called a phenomenon. The selflessness of phenomena is the realization that both inner consciousness and external phenomena are, in nature, peaceful and empty. Not only are external phenomena empty, but the mind is also empty. The perceiver and the perceived are non-dual. Since the percept is empty, the perceiver is also empty, devoid of inherent nature. Mahayana meditators believe that the root of samsara is afflictions, and the root of afflictions is self-clinging. Eliminating self-clinging is the way to be liberated from samsara. To eliminate afflictions, they meditate on the nature of external and internal phenomena in detail, realizing that they are completely insubstantial, like bubbles in water. The belief in the inherent nature of external phenomena is called cognitive obscuration. When one eliminates this obscuration, one is freed from samsara. Therefore, bodhisattvas meditate on emptiness, sunyata. In the Heart Sutra, the Buddha says there are no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, etc., and no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, etc. One might think the Buddha meant there are literally no eyes, and so on. When the Buddha gave this teaching, he was describing what one experiences when one rests in samadhi. He didn't explain this in the sutra because at that time his disciples were in a meditative state and therefore could understand the teaching without further explanation. The Buddha taught in this manner in the Heart Sutra and other Prajnaparamita sutras. These teachings are explained in commentaries such as Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way. When examining cause and effect, Chandrakirti demonstrates the nature of emptiness by examining the nature of cause. In the differentiation of the 2 truths, Master Jinagrabhada shows the nature of emptiness by analyzing the nature of effect. The true natures of cause and effect are the same. As I have often said, cause and effect also lack inherent nature. When we say the law of cause and effect is infallible, it may seem as though cause and effect truly exist. However, both the cause and the effect are devoid of intrinsic nature. They are conditioned phenomena. The cause is a condition, and the effect is also a condition. All phenomena arise from conditions. Nothing possesses substantial existence. They serve as conditions for one another and interrelate. There are only conditions, but no solid cause that produces a solid effect. I have often emphasized that cause and effect lack inherent nature. Their essence is dependent arising. In addition, in the fundamental wisdom of the Middle Way, Nagarjuna demonstrates the emptiness of all phenomena by analysing the nature of dependent origination. No phenomenon arises without a cause. In Tibet, there are many great commentaries on emptiness, such as Lama Mipam's. He described how the Indian master Shantarakshita came to Tibet and wrote The Adornment of the Middle Way, which explained emptiness through the reasoning that things are neither singular nor plural. Mipam regarded this approach as very powerful and easy to understand. For something to be real, it must exist as a single entity. For example, if a hand truly exists, it must be one entity, a hand. When one looks at it, one sees a hand. When one shows it to others, they agree it is a hand. However, when we examine it more closely, we see that it consists of a thumb, fingers, skin, flesh, bones, and so on. Thus, it is not a hand, but, as the Buddha said, merely an aggregation of various parts that come together. Therefore, a hand is actually an appearance arising from the interdependent parts we call a hand, but there is no real hand there. All things are the same. When we mentally divide them with the method of multiplicity, we see that everything is like this. Through this reasoning, we become convinced of the nature of emptiness. This is also a method. Nothing exists as a singular entity. Everything can be divided endlessly. In other words, all phenomena arise from conditions. We cannot find anything with solid existence. Everything can be broken down further. This is the meaning of dependent origination. This is also a way of analysing dependent arising. Everything depends on various conditions, and each condition can be further divided. Hence, it is called dependent origination. The Vipassana of the Mahayana is the meditation on emptiness, also called dependent origination. Since dependent arising implies emptiness, it is also the meditation on dependent arising. By reflecting on dependent origination, one can realize the nature of emptiness. As I have explained before, dependent arising itself entails emptiness. Speaking of dependent origination implies emptiness. If the nature were not empty, it could not be dependently arisen. On the other hand, if it were not dependent arising, it would have an inherent nature and would not be empty. Dependent origination and emptiness are one and inseparable. We cannot separate them. Emptiness itself entails dependent arising, like a coin whose front implies the back. One side is emptiness, the other is dependent origination. The two sides are one and cannot be separated. Without the front, how can there be a back? Without the back, how can there be a front? They are one, though viewed from different angles. From the front, it is emptiness. From the back, it is dependent arising. In reality, they refer to the same thing. This means that all phenomena that arise depend on other phenomena and therefore have no real existence of their own. Take the reflection of the moon in water as an example. There was no real moon in the water. However, due to the interdependence of the moon in the sky and the water on the ground, a reflection of the moon appears. Yet when we examine the water to see where the moon is, we cannot find it. Ordinary beings are like the monkeys who try to scoop the moon out of the water. We are just like those monkeys, all wishing to scoop the moon from the water. But in the end, it is all in vain, like drawing water with a bamboo basket. Don't laugh at the monkeys. You are not even as good as them. The monkeys work together to scoop the moon, while we each try to scoop our own moon, making a mess. While scooping, we even fight in the water over our moon, which is worse than the monkeys. In the same way, all phenomena arise through dependence on other things and have no real existence of their own. Realizing this fact is realizing emptiness, and with this realization, afflictions cease. So, to put an end to afflictions, we should meditate on emptiness. Since everything is empty, what is there to be anxious about? A patient here is in great pain. When he first came, I told him, "Don't be afraid of the pain. Since you are already in such a state, regard yourself as dead. Just recite the Buddha's name and let the pain be. No matter how painful you feel, you must fully accept it." Ordinary beings tend to reject suffering. When suffering arises, they want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and their minds are anxious. In reality, this only intensifies the pain. If you let the pain be, fully accept it, and settle your mind on the Buddha's name or meditation, the pain will lessen significantly. But you must truly let go of it. This is achievable. Ordinary beings, however, usually eagerly want to get rid of suffering, so they become very attached to it, and their minds fixate on it. As a result, they experience even more pain. A few days later, this patient forgot what I taught him and suffered greatly yesterday. Today, I told him, "You've forgotten again." He replied, "I've been in unbearable pain these days." I said, "You have to experience the consequence of your own karma." The pain was so intense that he wished to die. Beings are like this. They don't want to engage in spiritual practice until reaching such a point. If he follows my advice and transcends this hurdle, he will become an excellent practitioner. He experienced immense suffering, as if the most sensitive part of the body were being constantly scraped and cut with a knife with great force, like a living hell. This kind of suffering can be experienced in this life without going to hell. I told him, if you don't attain liberation, this suffering has no end, for the cycle of rebirth is endless. For example, when one takes a piece of paper and rips it up, the act doesn't upset anyone. But if the piece of paper happens to be a $10 bill, the act suddenly becomes significant. Of course, the bill should be of a large denomination. Why does it suddenly become important? Because everyone agrees that a $10 bill is valuable, but in fact it is just a piece of paper. Why is something regarded as important by people? There is no particular reason. It just happens that everyone thinks that it is important. This is dependent origination. The value of things depends on what everyone thinks. This applies not only to paper money, but also to gold. Everyone thinks that gold is more valuable than iron. Why is that? Simply because everyone thinks so. Gold itself does not have amrita flowing out of it. It is just a metal. In this way, the mind clings to things, regarding some as good and some as bad. But nothing is ultimately good or bad in itself. It is just a perception of the mind. The nature of all things is emptiness. This analogy of gold and iron is very fitting. Once we see shining gold, the mind stirs, giving rise to greed and attachment. In contrast, when we see iron, we feel indifferent. Yet, iron is useful, while gold can only be made into ornaments like rings, without practical value. Are golden things necessarily beautiful? Not necessarily. Thus, our sense of something being good arises from attachment.